take over as a senior scientist, which that position was then approved by the Danum Valley Management Committee, which was fantastic. And I've more or less been here ever since. So I lived at Danum for getting on for 10 years as the sort of resident senior scientist. And then subsequently I became the director of the Southeast Asia Rainforest Research Project, which I'm still doing today. So, I mean, firstly, I think it's true to say that the current research program is building on some really strong foundations. The team that established Danum Valley, so going back all the way to the early 1980s, really knew what they were doing. So the field centre is perfectly located to facilitate studies that compare log forest that's been harvested for timber, with pristine forest. And really, for many years, a couple of decades at least, that really was the core of the research program era at Danum. So looking at what the impacts are of timber harvesting across a whole range of parameters. So the impacts on biodiversity, impacts on hydrology, impacts on climate emissions and so forth. So the current research program has built strongly on those foundations. Of course, now we have scientists who often have part of their work here at Danum as a primary forest control site and in log forest, but also looking at issues related to forest fragmentation and connectivity in the wider landscape of the Summer Foundation area and indeed elsewhere in Summer. So the program now is very different from when I was first here, where many of the scientists had their work in and around the field centre itself. It's now much more sort of widely dispersed, if you like, but Danum Valley is still the mothership, if you like. So it's, in terms of its international importance, this place is certainly in the very top league of tropical forest field stations, and most certainly the leading tropical forest research centre in Southeast Asia. So Danum Valley is highly regarded internationally. The science that is done here is among the very best in the world, and it's addressing questions of key conservation importance. So not just what are the impacts of forest disturbance and how forests and the species that live within forests recover after disturbance by logging, but what are the impacts of forest conversion to agriculture, how you sort of minimise the footprint of forest loss, which is one sees in all countries. That there's a requirement, obviously, for communities to convert areas of natural habitat for agricultural production. But a lot of the research that we do now looks at how the benefits from agriculture can be secured while minimising the environmental footprint. The research program here is I think now more broadly based than it's ever been. But those early foundations are crucially important in terms of underpinning the research program that we see now. As with all science, building those layers of those layers of research, layers of scientific understanding over decades in a single location is valuable and rare. There are not many places like this globally, and especially in the tropics. So, it's a priceless facility. As I say, the research program here at Danum is among the finest anywhere in the world. It's difficult to sort of pick out one or two papers, one or two published papers as being especially outstanding. In a sense, it's unfair to do that because it's the body of science that's so valuable. But I think it's possible to highlight some particular areas of excellence. The forest dynamics work that's been done here, initially by David Newbury and his group from Stirling and Blackheath Burn universities, was that work really sort of pioneered the research program at Danum Valley. We built on that by establishing a 50-hectare plot in collaboration with the University of Aberdeen. So that forest dynamics work, looking at how forests change over time and in response to what, particularly the influence of a changing climate on tropical forests, is extremely important. Danum Valley is some of the Danum Valley and the surrounding forests is some of the best described areas of tropical forest with respect to hydrological issues. So the hydrology program really stands out. Some of the work on biodiversity, particularly canopy biodiversity, is exceptional. What else? Some of the more, in a sense, applied studies looking at forest, the methodology behind forest restoration. So some years ago we established a 500-hectare biodiversity experiment in collaboration with a group of scientists from the University of Zurich and latterly Oxford. That work has really sort of shone a light on how forest has been damaged by logging can be restored. What else to say? Some of the canopy science has been really excellent. And although not all of the work has been based at Danum, some of the work that was done as part of the Stability of Altered Forest Ecosystems project, the SAFE project, led by Rob Ewers from Imperial College, which included components, research components at Danum Valley, it is also exceptional. So the areas that we've worked on as part of the SAFE project are now, in terms of the intensity of research, they're some of the most extensively studied areas of forest anywhere in the tropics. So it's hard to pick out one or two key findings, but I think the breadth of research is remarkable. You know, our scientists have now published over 800 journal articles, which really have sort of underpinned a step change in our understanding of not just the sort of basic ecology of forests, but how they respond, how tropical forests respond to disturbance by logging, respond to conversion to plantation, and how we can maintain connectivity and ecosystem functioning in a plantation landscape. So the body of science is world leading, and hopefully the impact of that science has had is also world class. I mean, we work very hard as a research program to take the collected findings from the research program and translate those findings into a form that is useful for policymakers, for conservation practitioners, for sustainability staff, from plantation and forestry companies. So, we sort of, in a sense, condense the findings of many of the published papers that have been produced as part of the Danum program, bring that down to a 3 or 4 page science for policy brief that can be picked up by manager of a plantation company, or an environment minister in the state government, or the head of a conservation NGO. And that paper summarizes, synthesizes, and makes recommendations on the basis of perhaps 30, 40, 50, 100 individual research findings, but in a form that allows that science to be implemented, if you like, at the sharp end of conservation, of sustainability, of environmental planning. It's great that Dr. Whitey has convened this workshop, and it's I think it's been very well convened, in as much as it's brought together people that have worked at Danum Valley and been involved in its inception and the early management of the centre. So people like Charlie Ghazali, Professor Ghazali, who was one of the key members of the management committee and the group that established Danum Valley. Whitey himself has got more experience here than anyone really, and both as a scientist, as the manager of Danum Valley, and now as director of the division that manages all of Yas and Saba's conservation and research interests. So there are enormous wells of experience to draw, but also scientists who've been working here more recently. My colleague from NTU in Singapore, Dr. Eleanor Slade, and her postdoc researcher Lee Yuen, sort of represent sort of a much more recent cohort of scientists that are working with us. So it's great to see sort of several generations almost of Danum scientists being brought together to discuss what the future might look like. So it's been really interesting to hear about some of the ideas for future research. Of course, it's an open question as to how that research is funded. But I think from my point of view, I don't think it's ever too good an idea to be very prescriptive about what type of science absolutely must be done at Danum. But I think what's really encouraging is the role that Whitey and some of the other representatives of the key state agencies in Sabah have in terms of facilitating an international research program. So a program that includes not just Malaysian scientists, but international researchers as well. So I think it's fair to say that Yas and Sabah, Dr. Whitey's division partners at the Sabah Biodiversity Centre, the local universities, other key government agencies have consistently maintained an open doors policy when it comes to research at Danum Valley and Sabah more generally. I think many of these agencies, particularly Yas and Sabah and SABC, see their role as facilitating and enabling science rather than just regulating it. So while making sure that everybody's following the rules is important, I think especially Whitey, but also many of the other agencies involved in research in Sabah really have provided an enabling, facilitating environment that welcomes scientists from across the world, which, and I hope this doesn't sound condescending, I don't think Sabah realizes quite how unusual it is in that regard. uh, that there are many countries where it's not at all easy to do research in this way. So the fact that Sabah and so many of its key agencies operates this very welcoming, open doors, enabling way, I think is really important. Um, I mean, also, I think it's very important for me to say how important um, the support that we've, how important it is the support that we've received from our local team of research assistants. Many of our staff predate me working, so I've now worked with the program with Danum Valley for nearly 25 years now, and many of our research assistants have worked with our program for even longer than that. Of the half a dozen guys who've been with us the longest, our most senior research assistants, we've never lost a senior research assistant, research manager. It's the same team that we have now in terms of the sort of senior guys as we had when I first took over as senior scientist 20 years ago, which is remarkable. I mean, it's almost unheard of, I think, certainly in corporate settings, to have that sort of longevity of the same team in place. But you see this in the Sabah Foundation as well. Whitey's been there for donkey's years. Hamza, Jada have been there for years. That core team of staff are still, more or less the same team that were in place when I started 20 more years ago. I think in my first week at Danum, when I came back to do my PhD, I shared a room with Hamza, and it was also his first week at Danum as a master's student working on a big research project. So there's a real sort of thread running through the team that have made this place so incredibly special.